tell you how challenging it is for them to fly GPS approaches. Well, you and I are about to fly a GPS approach, and you'll find it's really not all that tough. Most of the techniques are the same as for any other instrument approach. The real difference lies in making sure that you've selected the correct approach on the GPS receiver and that you have the unit configured for approach rather than for en route navigation. And of course, your fixes will look different because they're waypoints instead of navigation stations or intersections. But as with all approaches, if we self-brief it well, it will help make the approach go smoothly. And you'll find that the GPS will take a lot of the workload off of you. In this case, I'm headed southeast bound on Victor 23 towards the Oceanside Vortex, and I'm approaching Kelp's intersection. I want to shoot an approach to Ramona, California. In my pre-flight planning, I saw in the airport facility directory that Ramona has an ASOS on 121.125. Well, I've listened to it already, and I know the wind is out of the east, so I've told the controller I'd like to shoot the GPS runway 9er approach. Now, during my pre-flight, I confirmed that the database in the GPS is current and that this approach is in the database. Now let's check out the approach chart. It's for Ramona, California, and it's the GPS approach for runway 9er. In the upper left are the communications frequencies. Southern California approach, or SoCal, on 132.2, and Ramona Unicom on 122.7. 122.7 is the Common Traffic Advisory frequency. Now, as you remember, this black oval with a white L next to the frequency tells you they have pilot-controlled lighting. And it's next to the frequency you'd use to control the lights. In this case, 122.7. When I look at the approach course in the plan view, I see there are two initial approach fix waypoints, Cariff and Robin. Since I'm coming from the northwest, I'll expect to use Robin as my initial approach fix. From Robin, I'll track southbound on a course of 169er at 3,600 feet to Axsock. Then I'll turn eastbound to Kijko and fly a course of 085 degrees at 3,000 feet. Kijko is the final approach fix, and the final approach course continues as 085 degrees. Because this is a GPS approach, I'll have a constant readout of my distance as I approach each waypoint. That makes identifying fixes and knowing when I'm at the missed approach point much easier and much more accurate because I don't have to time the approach. The missed approach point is the Aramie waypoint. The minimum safe altitudes are in the lower left corner of this plan view. The altitude for all directions is 7,700 feet MSL, and it's based on the Aramie waypoint. In the profile view, I confirm the altitude is 3,000 feet from Axsock to Kijko. There's a step-down fix after I cross Kijko. It's defined as 3 nautical miles from the Aramie waypoint. So when I get to Kijko, I'll start a descent to 2,500 feet. From the final approach fix to the step-down fix, I need to lose 500 feet. And I only have 2 miles to do it in. I'll be flying this approach at 90 knots, or about 1.5 miles per minute, so it will only take me a little over a minute to fly that distance. I'd better get right into my non-precision approach rate of descent of 800 feet per minute. When I'm 3 nautical miles from Aramie waypoint, I'll continue my descent to my minimum descent altitude. That's 2,240 feet for the straight-in approach to runway 9er, which is 851 feet above the touchdown zone. This time, I only have 260 feet to lose, and I have 3 miles to do it in. At my speed of 1.5 miles per minute, I'll have 2 minutes to lose this 260 feet. So I'll use my normal rate of descent of 500 feet per minute. That will get me down in ample time to get leveled off and stabilized at the MDA well before I need to be looking for the runway. It will also keep me from descending so fast that I bust right through my altitude. If I need to do a missed approach, the instructions are to make a climbing left turn to 5,000 feet, direct Robin waypoint, and hold in the holding pattern shown. The entry will be easy. Just eyeballing it, I can tell it's a direct entry. As far as lights are concerned, the airport diagram doesn't show any approach lights for runway 9er, but that runway does have MIRL, medium intensity runway edge lights. And the white L and the black oval again means the lights are controlled by the pilot. In the plan view, the first note says, circling not authorized north of runway 9er 27. When I check out the VFR chart, and that's always a smart idea when you're planning or briefing an IFR approach, I can see why. There are some hills pretty close into the airport on the north side. Now the next note says, obtain local altimeter setting on CTAF. When not received, use Miramar Marine Corps Air Station Mitchell Field altimeter setting. If I have to use the Miramar altimeter setting, I'll have a higher minimum descent altitude and required visibility. Under the minimum section, the T in the upside-down black triangle means Ramona has a departure procedure or non-standard takeoff minimums for commercial operators, or both. And the NA in this note means I cannot file Ramona as an alternate on an IFR flight plan. The key items from my approach self-briefing are, how low can I go? My minimum descent altitude is 2,240 feet. How far can I go? My missed approach point is Aramie waypoint. And finally, which way do I go on missed approach? In this case, I would make a climbing left turn of almost 180 degrees to 5,000 feet. Now I'll put the chart where I can see it easily as I fly the approach. Now let's set up the navigation radios for the approach. Since my GPS is connected to my number 1 nav indicator, and I'll need to use that for the approach, I'm using my number 2 nav to fly my airway. First, I'll make sure the number 1 navigation indicator is set to GPS. And it is. Now I'll load the GPS approach for Ramona Airport into the active flight plan. To do that, I'll press the procedure button, and it asks me if I want to select an approach. That's what I want to do. So I'll press enter. On the next page, Ramona Airport, KRNM, is already highlighted as one of the nearest airports with an instrument approach. So I'll press enter again. Next, I'll select the GPS runway 9er approach. To do that, I'll move the cursor over GPS 09er and press enter. Next, I'll choose my initial approach fix, Robin. It's the 3rd entry in the list. By moving the cursor over it and again pressing enter. Well, everything looks good so far, and the cursor is on Add to Flight Plan 0. So I'll press enter again. That will add the approach procedure to the active flight plan. Now I'll scroll quickly through the waypoints to make sure that I selected the right initial approach fix and that everything looks okay. As you remember, the approach chart labeled the missed approach waypoint as Aramie waypoint. But notice that the GPS labels it as RW09M, meaning the runway 9er missed approach point. That's because they're changing the GPS databases to comply with the new naming convention on GPS approaches. Also, see the note after RW09M that says no waypoint sequencing? That's to remind me that the GPS will not automatically sequence past the missed approach waypoint, and I'll have to do that manually. Now I'll back up to the initial approach fix, Robin labeled with a small I, hit direct to, and hit enter. During my weather briefing, I asked flight service for a rain prediction, and the briefer confirmed that rain will be available during the approach. But it's a good idea to do another rain check shortly before starting the approach, in case of an unexpected satellite outage. So let's do one now. I'll select aux and go to page 3. And wait while the receiver does its calculation. Good, we'll have RAIM available. I'll press and hold the range button now for 2 seconds to go to the Nav4 page and have automatic zooming. That's the page that Bendix King recommends that we use for flying a GPS approach. They feel, and I agree, that that page gives the best display. It not only gives me the distance to Robin Waypoint, it also gives me a map of what's happening. And now the GPS is all set to fly the approach. For the comms, I'm working SoCal approach on my number 1 comm, and I've already set up Ramona Unicom 122.7 on the standby. I used the number 2 comm to listen to the ASOS weather earlier, and I'll leave that there in case I get a chance to update my weather. I won't be using any of my regular nav radios on this approach, but I've set them to frequencies that I might need if I don't get in on the approach to Ramona. And I've used the audio panel as a checklist to make sure that I've not missed anything. Now that that's all done, I'll go ahead and do the before landing checklist. Pilot and passenger seat backs are upright. Seats and seat belts are secured. Fuel selector valve is on both. Mixture is rich. Landing light going on. Autopilot is off. Before landing checklist is complete.